Here we are. You're at the fag end of your time with the PCT. Then got fed up with that. Commissioning wasn't working. Why did you leave? A better job offer, or did you just get hacked off of it?
It was just, I just realised. I mean, the key thing I found frustrating was, well, firstly, I hadn't understood power dynamics, how power worked within the NHS, which is around the clinical colleges, and then around the hospital trust, and then around the regional health authority. And I naively thought that being on the board of primary care trust, you'd have loads of choice and discretion. How wrong could I be? So that whole sense of...
the whole system was designed so you
no, exactly. I remember the moment when they're actually trying to roll out the new national IT, all that Richard Granger stuff, national IT service. And
now be careful, because I'm the only person left in Britain who's a big fan of Richard Granger.
Well, the fascinating thing was that there was a moment when the board said, problem is, to achieve it, we can't afford this, we're not going to do it. And he just looked us in the eye and said, he just looked the non-execs in the eye and just said, I'm sorry, this is not optional. So the whole thing about not having self-determination for me was a real issue, about the sense that you're to shape stuff. And just an opportunity, and ironically, through the leadership development program that the NHS had put me through, the tail end of that was, we're now going to bring in some recruitment consultants to help you develop your CV, who then touted me around. Actually, the people who I was then approached about a job with as the managing director of services with what was then RNID, Royal National Institute for Deaf People, Action on Hearing Loss, to go back into the voluntary sector. They had just won Charity of the Year twice in a row, effectively, and it was the opportunity to run their social enterprises, kind of call centres, and community services for deaf people with learning disabilities and mental health needs.
Social enterprises just started to become sexy.
Yeah.
I don't know where they came out. They came out of left field. I mean, the PCTs needed them to get rid of all their community nurses.
They did.
And so there's still some that have survived, I think. The rest, I think, they got given away to Virgin in some kind of slavery deal. So social enterprises, I was interested in those. I helped with one of the first that was started down in Surrey, and it looked like a model that was right for the health service. I thought, people don't work in the health service if they want to make a shed load of money. They won't tell you this, but they work fundamentally because they care a lot about what they do.
Yeah,
and to be able to care a lot about what you do and run the show, it seems to me like an idea made in heaven, but it never really caught on. Is it too much of a risk?
But the people, well, I think it is. I think it's slowly growing, but you're quite right. It's been much slower than anticipated, and I think they're just operating in very constrained environments. And when I talk to the leaders of social enterprises in the health sector who are genuinely taken over, community health trusts and so on, what again they're having to work through is all the professional silos, because they just want to do one visit to someone's home. They don't want a community nurse and then a physio and then
it's a bit like Birdsong, which I'm sure which we spoke about a lot of time. Okay, so fine, you got fed up with that?
No, I didn't. I really enjoyed it. After 5 years of that, I learned massively about disability, about community services, and about running residential community, because we ran residential community homes as well as running these social enterprises. And then I was asked I did that for 5 years, and then I was asked to apply to go back to the Red Cross as their managing director, overseeing the UK, the international, and the development of an advocacy programme. And to be honest, I'm still a believer.
Why does the Red Cross need advocacy?
Because if we're going to, at the end of the day, the footprint that we have is simply not enough to change the world. And what we need to do is to maximise.
Bono's going to do that.
No. But what we want to do is to take the learning that in-out report is actually start to generate insights into what we do in the areas that we're focusing on, go-to areas, generate insight that then influences others and build momentum.
Quite a lot of people, this audience is very knowledgeable, but a lot of people watching won't realise the depth of services that you provide. And if you go back in the history, you used to run the ambulance service in Scotland, I think, at one stage.
Yeah, no, we've done. Our role alongside health services goes right way back to the First World War, and the role we played in the First World War with some of the community hospitals that were set up for returning servicemen, and then after the Second World War, again, very naturally working alongside the NHS.
Tell you what interests me, as well as having the first motorised ambulances in the First World War, which I thought was a bit of a hoot, it's not bad enough with all the mud with the horses. I can't imagine driving an ambulance all the mud. But where does the international consent come from to your neutrality?
Well, that's fascinating. So neutrality is our three key operating principles are humanity, which is about helping people; impartiality, which is we'll help you, drawn from the battlefield, irrespective of your nationality, religion, ethnicity, gender, all of that stuff, as you'd expect. And then the neutrality piece is saying that we will not campaign you may challenge me on this, in controversial ways on political issues. And the key about that is about jeopardising access. So the Red Cross around the world is able to visit people in prisons, political prisoners, all of the time in order to influence the authorities to improve the conditions in those prisons. And after each visit, we write a report that says, this is good, but this is not good, etc. Human Rights Watch or Amnesty, again, playing their part in the ecosystem, would actually, they can get the story out of the prison and then publicise it. Of course, they'll never be allowed back. The key for us is about the way in which we operate that preserves the right of access. So in Syria, the key is to be able to cross the front line. If we criticise, the Assad regime, then we won't be allowed to cross the front line that enables us to support people on both sides of the, well, sadly, there's many sides to that conflict, on all sides of that conflict. So
just focus on the people.
So a lot of it, if I may say, is and what we've learnt about over the last 3 or 4 years, because we've spent a lot of time thinking about what is advocacy and how do we do it in a way that doesn't jeopardise that neutrality. And it's a lot about bearing witness. So what do we see? What do we see? It's not controversial to describe, the situation facing refugees who are destitute living on the streets in this country. That's just bearing witness. And where we can see how policy could change that would make would reduce their vulnerability, reduce their chance of actually connecting with the system, accessing a GP, getting a lawyer, and all of that stuff, and telling the story about how government policy does or doesn't cause that. That is, the same with the In-Out report. What we're describing there is not controversial.
I want to come on to the report. It's an excellent report, but I am interested in this niche that you somehow got, because most charities campaign, don't they?
Yep.
They are campaigning, and they either gain or lose traction because they are campaigners.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, I wrote a piece the other day about the charity sector, and I rather felt that the charity sector was too congested by, and this you have to express this very clearly, because I'm not being critical of the charities, but they are often started out of bereavement or grief for the best of intentions. And I was involved a little bit in some bowel cancer charities where we got them all together and said, look, you would be so much more powerful if you had one vision, or at least had one annual report, or tried to focus in some way on its own. And it just seems to me that we depend a lot on the third sector, but the big names are there, aren't there? Whereas Macmillan, which is a business, you've got the Terence Higgins Trust, business, Red Cross, business. It's run like a business, and the minor charities. I wonder if they don't just dilute themselves because there are so many of them.
Well, I've said before, so yes, I think there are too many charities. If you do a search, so when I was in the deafness field, you do a search on the Charity Commission registers, 400 or 500 charities with the word deafness in their title. If you had half that number, you'd still have loads of choice and diversity, but you'd have half the number of CEOs, half the number of payroll officers. Well, you'd have a greater chance of actually building capacity. And of course, but the danger is that we've not explained well, and we're not being helped by our regulator either in terms of the outgoing chair of the Charity Commission, is that there's a narrative builds up in some of the right-wing press, right-wing MPs around small charities good, large charities bad. But we didn't start out big. The Red Cross was tiny to start. It was just an idea. It was an acorn that grew, and actually because
it's a combination of two organisations, wasn't it?
No, it's a really simple, powerful idea. That's our founder saw the carnage on the Battle of Solferino in northern Italy, and said, wouldn't it be great if in every country in the world there were volunteers who were ready to be neutral and impartial, zealous and thoroughly qualified volunteers, mind you, qualified, who were ready to provide help to whoever needed it. And that was an idea that went viral, before we ever had the internet and email and Instagram and all that malarkey. It led to the advocacy for the Geneva Conventions to create the rules of war. And actually, we didn't. My point is, we grew large because it was a simple, powerful idea that remained relevant to our times. And the challenge with the small charities is not only the risk of duplication, but it's also, more importantly, actually about the risk to the pathway. So when I think about the pathway for refugees, if they have to get support from a whole bunch of different local organisations in order to piece together some kind of life, that's not good for them. There are things that diaspora organisations, for example, can do that we'll never be able to do, and we want to. In fact, we work with lots of small organisations, both in the refugee sector and in the health and social care sector. But the point is, small is not inherently good, and proliferation, 1,000 flowers blooming, is not inherently good if it leads to fragmentation.
We certainly do have that. On the bigger charities. They have to be run as a business.
Well, I'm going to challenge you. I meant to say that.
Well, let me clarify what I mean. I mean, you get the really big organisations with a big footprint who come in and they compete for contracts with the NHS, for example. Now, Treasury rules, I think, say you can't have a contract bigger than a third of your turnover. So you've got to be pretty big to get something. Something of any size. And it's at the point where I suppose what I'm saying is the point where you kind of stop being a charity and start being a business. And Macmillan, I think, have been successful at that because they still have people running marathons and making jam and doing daft things to raise money. And without the Terence Higgins Trust, for example, we wouldn't have the triple therapy HIV protocols that we've got now. So they do make a big difference, but you have to kind of almost stop being what you started out as in order to engage with government.
I think that's true, so we're at an interesting transition point, actually. So I have resisted the use of business language over my time as CEO because I think the risk is that it plays to the narrative that somehow we've lost our soul. And as I said earlier, I'm as inspired by that original vision of our founder, Henri Dunant, now as I was when I first ever joined, my first stint with the Red Cross. And most of the people I meet within the Red Cross that's what inspires them. And if we start to talk and concede, as it were, that we're a business, then I think we do risk losing that sense of the soul. Where you're completely right is that you can't run an organisation of our size with the diversity of activities within it without being really businesslike in the way in which you work and really challenging ourselves about. We can't do it all through relationships. We have to use technology. We have to have rigorous processes. We have to be compliant. We have to do GDPR. We have to run bits of it like a machine. But somehow within that, we have to hold on to our ethos and our soul about who we are, why we're here, and why we were founded.
Well, all organisations could have a vision like that, couldn't they? I mean, Absolutely. The NHS perhaps has lost the knack of doing that. I've written a piece, I think, comes out this week, where I'm talking about the mission of what is tomorrow. What is the mission statement for the NHS? I don't know. I mean, if you Google mission statement NHS, you get 3,000 gazillion answers because every little tiny bit of the NHS has got its own mission statement and it's got its own view about what it's supposed to be doing. We don't seem to be able to march in step.
No, I think that's right. That's why you've got to hold on to why you're here. And actually, we're exploring an idea around our brand around being the platform for human kindness. We don't want to monopolise anything. We want to mobilise human kindness for people in crisis. And people can come and support us in a whole range of ways. They can give their time, they can give their money, they can help, they can write to their MP when we're trying to influence MPs around family reunion policy for refugees. So we start to mobilise people to show their kindness. So there's that discretionary moment. Because
but when you become that kind of polished organisation, do we expect too much? I mean, look what's happened to Oxfam. So there we've got 5-7 years ago, a country ripped apart, no proper rule of law, no proper infrastructure. Some people behaved badly, no policing at the time, probably not very much managerial connectivity with what was going on because of the nature of the infrastructure. And here is the organisation today going through hell and back because of the behaviour of probably less than a dozen people. Now, the other side of the argument is bad behaviour is always bad behaviour, and we're not going to put up with it. We're going to stamp it out. But you must worry about that because you've got a sprawling organisation and you span some very difficult places.
No, you're absolutely right. We work, so essentially half our charitable spend is in the UK and half of it is in our international work. And we're working across 30 countries and in some very difficult places. And so...
Are we going to have a story about the Red Cross?
I hope not, but I don't know. The interesting thing about the Oxfam stories, I think, by the way, you've diagnosed it exactly. But the interesting thing about Oxfam were very open early about the number of safeguarding cases they had. And I think, I've got the exact figure, it was over 80. But the interesting thing, a couple of interesting things about that. I think, firstly, 2/3 of those cases were in the shops. Only 1/3 were overseas, so this is close to home in terms of the day-to-day volunteering activity where things are happening, so that none of us can afford to be complacent about it. And of course, the other risk is that actually their safeguarding stand, as indeed one of the American universities has commented, certainly that their processes around, for example, identifying sexual harassment were amongst the best in the sector. And therefore, of course, their figures look particularly damaging. But maybe it's just because they're better. And so you've got this huge irony of the current situation.
Yeah. And how do you, so you've got this big, polished organisation trying to conduct good works, let's put it like that, and in the midst of it all you get something like this happen. Can you really do safeguarding in those circumstances? Or are you really at the mercy of people who volunteer and may actually volunteer for sinister motives that you may be unaware of?
Well, I think it's just like safeguarding. In principle, it's the same as safeguarding here, which the challenge is that you've got a lot of people on short-term contracts. So the aid, as has been described in the press again accurately, which is that you've got a lot of people on short contracts, 6 months to 2 years, who move around between different agencies. Therefore the whole process, so we would have rigorous processes of recruitment, selection, training, but referencing can be an issue because you deal with whatever reference you've got. And actually, so some of the ideas we're now exploring together as a sector are around, for example, humanitarian passports. So actually,
that was the Save the Children, was it? I think came up with that.
Indeed,
I was going to ask you about that. That does seem to me to be something you could do.
Absolutely.
The extent to which it, like everything else, could be fiddled, I don't know, but you could do it, I suppose.
Well, we can look at it. And
you're going to have to, aren't you?
Yeah, no, yes, absolutely. We'll definitely be looking at it. We'll also be looking at how we... and by the way, what we're doing is a root and branch review of all of our processes and records and so on to make sure that we're fit for purpose.
But you do get to the point, don't you? When Oxfam had the problem with the shops, I was astounded to see how many safeguarding issues there were in the shops. But I suppose if you think about it, if you are of that mind to want to do that kind of thing, volunteering in an environment where, because you're a volunteer, people say you must be a lovely person, you're volunteering, you're doing it for all the right reasons, come in. Or do you say, hang on a minute, you're a lovely person, come in, but wait a minute. I never get just a little people to read my stuff. No, I used to write endlessly about the Duchess when she was my mum, and she was about 85, I think, at the time. And she came home one day and and she said, with this damn great form. I said, what is that? And she said, oh, I've got she used to run the tea bar at the day centre. And she said, I've got to get a CRB check, you see. It's this bloody great big form for this 80, I think she was 85 then. I said, why? She said, well, I work with vulnerable adults. I said, Mum, you are a vulnerable adult. You know, it just seemed to me to be bizarre. But I mean, you have to, it's difficult, isn't it? You want to encourage people, but on the other hand, you don't want to put them off by turning the whole thing to a horrible bureaucracy.
No, absolutely right. So so we have a vision of mobilising many, many more people to play a part in their community, be it under the auspices of the Red Cross or not. And a lot of it will be around good neighbourliness, about people showing their kindness, spotting when people's curtains haven't been drawn. And
you go into people's homes.
Exactly. But the moment you do that under the auspices of the Red Cross, then there is immediately a whole issue of responsibility about safeguarding, about DBS checks, about training and so on.
It's your backside.
Yeah, exactly. So how we do that in those circumstances. Of course, the thing about in shops as well is the range, the generational range. You've got from 14, 15-year-olds up to 85-year-olds together who have different, different language. And what's acceptable in one generation is not acceptable in another generation.
So you're reviewing your arrangements?
No, well, absolutely, because it's. I think every sector should be reviewing its arrangements. So we're reviewing everything, both about our UK arrangements and our international arrangements around all aspects of the recruitment, selection, development, referencing process, and we're reviewing historical records.
I guess all you can do really is that, and then if something does go wrong, and it will, because that's life, is you move quickly and transparently. I think where Oxfam come unstuck is I think they probably tried to think, well, do we reveal the fact we've had this very ugly incident and then jeopardise the charitable giving, or do we just deal with it like a business might deal with it actually and say, right, bugger off and there's a month's salary, You can't do that, can you?
And what you must do, I think, because that is the backstop, is you must tell the regulator. So we have Charity Commission is our regulator.
Are they any good?
You turn it off. I think.
Let me say, they look pretty supine and dozy to me.
Yeah, they have. That wasn't me agreeing, by the way.
What other opinions are available?
Indeed. So they know they need to step up their act. They've got a great new chief executive who absolutely gets the sector, and we are scrupulous about reporting to them when stuff has gone wrong.